Chavre, how are you? I hope everyone is gesund, stark und freilich, begashmis beruchnis. Hope everyone is healthy, strong, and happy physically and spiritually. Today is Erev Shabbos Kodesh Parshas Devarim. We started a new Sefer Chumash this week. It's Zayin Menachemov. Yesterday was Vov Menachemov, which was the Yortzeit of one of my Mashpiyim, Harav HaChosed HaChoizer, Reb Yoel, Kahn, one of the greatest Chassidim ever. So this year is Lili Nishmas Reb Yoel Reb Nachman HaKohen Kahn, and we'll connect this year today to Reb Yoel, Lili Nishmasoi. I think it's very important, especially if he doesn't have physical children, that Vishnantam Levanecha, Ela Talmidim, his disciples, his students, should commemorate the Yortzeit in a way which is recognizable and should make an impact. But first, since the war began, we added Tzedakah, Gdel, Tzedakah Shemacharev Sagula. Tzedakah brings Mashiach now, especially in the 9 days, where the Rebbe would say many times, Tziyim b'mishpati podeh v'shaveh b'tzedakah. Now we're going to say a prayer, also which the Rebbe connected very much to Mashiach. Es tzemach David avdecho meheros hatzmiach v'kan nitorim b'yushusecha ki l'shuoscha kivino kol hayom. Baruch atah Hashem matzmiach ke'yishu. We say this blessing 3 times a day by Shemona Esrei, and we're asking the Eibishter to speedily cause the Zion of David, your servant, to flourish, for Mashiach to come, and increase his power by your salvation. For we hope for your salvation all day. As the Rebbe explained many times, that ki lishuoscha kivinu kol hayom, that causes the redemption. This is one of the points that Rebbe will repeat again and again. We have to ask for Mashiach. We have to beg for Mashiach. We have to show Hashem that we can't take it anymore, even for one more second. And that's why Ki Lishuoscha Kvinu Kol Hayom means 24/7, not every day, but all day. And then we say Baruch Atah Hashem Matzmiach Ken Yeshua. In this week's parsha, the whole Sefer Devarim is called Mishnah Torah. It's a review where Moshe is giving his farbrengen, his parting farbrengen, before his estalkos, and it starts on Rosh Chodesh Shvat, and it goes till Zayin Adar. So one of the things that Moshe discusses in this week's parsha concerning learning from the past, as the Friedlander would say, the Ovar is Malamed of the Hoiver, the past is a teacher for the present. So he tells them about how there was a system we set up for judges. And this is what got me thinking that we should speak on this subject today, because connected to Reb Yoel is a leader, a teacher, is similar to a judge in a way. And what lessons can we take? And especially for the 9 days where we have to increase in Avos Yisrael, etc. So there's 2 psukim I want to focus on, where it speaks about the judges and what sort of qualities are we looking for in a judge. So in the pasuk Yud Gimel Kapitel Aleph, it says, "Havu lechem anoshim chachomim ulevoinim." Choose for yourself wise and intelligent men, v'yiduim l'shiftechem, well known by your respective tribes, v'asimim b'roshechem, and I will make them the leaders. So I'm not going into Rashi right now. First I want to quote to you something which in a way you'd think is so counterintuitive, and that's the Rambam, Hilchas Sanhedrin Peri Beis, Halacha Zayin. He says, what does it mean over there that they're Yiduim L'Shiftechem, that they're known, means that they're beloved by your tribes? And why? Elu Sharuach Chabrias Noichemen. People get benefit from them. People enjoy them. Ubamei Yu Ahuvim Librios. How do they become beloved by the people? Sheyu Bali Ayin Tova. They should have a good eye, a favorable eye. V'nefesh Shvola, a humble spirit. V'chevrason Tova. It's geschmack to be their friends. V'diburan umason benachas imabrius. And their good company and their speech and their conducting the business is always with a gentle approach. Wow, wow, wow. So we're talking about judges. You'd think if we're talking about a judge, so a judge means usually stern, representing the law, inflexible, so to speak. And over here we're saying, who do we choose as a judge? A social person, a person who gets along with people, a person who has an ayin tova, who ruach habri Yisrael nechayemena. A populist? I mean, I don't want to use words that might be misinterpreted in the wrong way. But why would you think that would make a good judge? Maybe on the opposite. He'll be thinking too much about what the people have to say. That's the worst thing that could be in a judge. So why over here does the Rambam, when he talks about what's being a good judge, and the Pasuk says, it means somebody people like. And that he has a good eye. Ayin tova, why ayin tova? Just say, look for the law. Look for the law and order, whatever the law and order is. Okay, so that's Pasuk Yud Gimel. Now, if you look in Pasuk Yud Zayin, what does it say? L'sakiru ponim b'mishpat. And he's talking to the one who's appointing the judges, as Rashi brings down. We're talking to the one who's in charge of appointing judges. He shouldn't say, Ish pleni noya giba, this person's handsome or strong. Or shivenu dayan, I'll make him for a judge. Ish pleni krevi, this guy's my relative, nepotism. Shivenu dayan be'ir. V'eni boka b'dinim. And what happens if he appoints him as a judge and he's not an expert in the law? Mechayev esazakay, mezaka esachayev, is going to cause that the innocent will become guilty and the guilty will become innocent. And Achmon al-Tzlan, then he showed favoritism in who he chose as a judge. And that's the worst thing possible that can come out of it as a result. It makes a whole mockery, etc. Interestingly, this is a lav from the Torah. It's counted as a lav, l'sakiru ponim b'mishpat. It's one of the mitzvahs connected to appointing a judge. There's actually 3 mitzvahs, but one of them we learn out from l'sakiru ponim b'mishpat. And I find the headline, the Devarim maschal of the mitzvah in the chinuch, very, very inspiring. And he says, Tov Yud Daled, mitzvah 614, shaloi l'manis dayan, not to appoint a judge, she'enei chacham b'dinei HaTorah, who's not wise in the dinei HaTorah, af al pi shu chacham b'chachmas acheres, even though he may be very, very wise in other wisdoms and other disciplines of wisdom, etc. So, bear with me, we're going to connect both of these attributes in a judge, and what makes a good judge, and what's the main key, the number one key. As usual in Yiddishkeit, it starts from one major point, and everything else grows out of that as an outcome, as a result. So, what we see from this, L'sakiru ponim b'mishpat, is that a person can be very, very wise, and have a tremendous high IQ, but he won't be mechavan l'mitosah shel Torah. Torah logic is a whole different thing. Chacham b'dinei HaTorah. You have to appoint someone who's a chacham b'dinei HaTorah. Only if he's a chacham b'dinei HaTorah. And if he's not, do not use such a person. Now, on the one hand, it's obvious. Obviously, just because somebody is an expert in gardening doesn't mean he's a cardiologist. Just because somebody is a dentist doesn't make him a brain surgeon, etc. But over here, there's also another whole point. It's a different world. Chochmas HaTorah, the barometer, the measure of a man, of a Chacham b'Torah, is going to be completely different than a measure of any other Chachmas. And what's the reason why? So there's a Gemara in Erevin where it talks about Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai. It's a famous Gemara. And the Gemara says, Eilu ve'eilu divrei Elokim chayim. Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel are both the words of Hashem. But then the Gemara says, Ne'ma zocha Beis Hillel lekvei halacha k'moison. Why was the halacha made going according to Beis Hillel And the Gemara says, when they say Noichen Valuven Hayu. Noichen Valuven Hayu means they were pleasant, they were agreeable, they were forbearing, which means they didn't demand respect, they didn't have ego. And then the Gemara mentions examples of this. Shoinin Devarim v'Devrei Beishamai. When they would talk about a concept, they would say, this is what we hold, this is what Beishamai says, so they would bring the opinion, the opposite view. They would also bring up the opposite view. V'lo the Gemara says, Ela shemakdimin divrei Beishamai l'divreihem. They actually first preceded the words of Beishamai to their words. Shows on humility. And the point is, by the way, there's another halacha Rambam in Hilchas Sanhedrin, I think this is from Perek Gimel halacha Yud, where he says that Chachamim or Rishonim borchin milis manos, they would run away from being appointed a judge, like because it might be connected to some level of kavod or leadership. So they would run away, and the only reason they accepted the position was there was no one else to do it. And you have to do something properly, so therefore they had to become judges. So what we are now going to discuss is the idea of humility. We spoke about this many times. When it comes to absorbing the wisdom of Torah, it has to come through bittul. And that's the key word, bittul, which is associated with humility. And the reason is, obviously, we'll take it two steps. First, let's have a discussion is, what is true seichel? True seichel is not about high IQ. True seichel is about objectivity, to be objective. I.e., to be objective really means to lose yourself. Subjective means that when you see something, it's connected to your experiences, your preconceived notions, or your agenda, or you have an ulterior motive, etc., whatever. So that when you're looking at something, you try to push your view, your preconceived perspective into what's the subject or the concept. But if we say that what's really the true definition of seichel, the true definition of seichel says then the zach with the zach is to come the truth should be illuminating. That means you get rid of your excess baggage, you get rid of anything inside yourself which could be an obstruction, your ego primarily, and then you become a vehicle that can do it for truth. So this is true if we're talking in general about seichel. So see Lekutei Sichos Noach Chelik Tes Vav Daled, which I can elaborate, and I'm sure in the past we spoke about this. Why a goy with his intellect alone will not come to truth. He needs the help of a yid. And the way the Rebbe explains it there, now is not a time to get into the whole length. There's a nefesh habahamis, the animal soul. There's a nefesh hasichlis, the intellectual soul. And there's the nefesh halikis, the godly soul. The nefesh habahamis represents the self-centering, self-conscious. Nefesh hasichlis represents intellect, which means to be objective. Nefesh halikis is selfless. The problem is, if you only have the nefesh hasichlis with the nefesh habahamis drags down the nefesh hasichlis. Your ego, your animal soul, corrupts and jeopardizes your intellect. Because of your ego, your intellect becomes warped, and it goes crooked. A yid who has a nefesh halikis, which the nature of the nefesh halikis is selflessness. So the nefesh halikis, which is the trait of selflessness, makes you a greater vehicle for your nefesh hasichlis to do his job properly, to be able to be objective as much as possible. That's why the Jews win the Nobel Prizes. Anyways, so that's what the Rebbe says over there. Now let's take it a step further. This is true even if you're talking about chokhmah bechlal. The idea of intellect is to see the truth for what the truth is. But that could be said, that's true even about intellect, which is just plain intellect, part of creation. But what about Hashem's intellect? literally infinity itself. So over there we have in addition to the idea of to being objective, which means to put yourself out of the way, we're actually saying that it has to be mamish bittul. The bittul is a vehicle, as the Rebbe says in many places, how do you take the infinity? How do you become a vehicle for infinity? Not through your existence, but through your non-existence. Make way for infinity. That's why v'nafshi kafel l'keltiyah psachli b'seresecha. Now we go back to the Lashon in the Chinuch, where he says, Shalei l'man is dayin she'nei chacham b'chok dinei HaTorah af al pi she'chacham b'chacham sacheres. When you're a chacham b'chacham sacheres, and actually the way Chassidus explains the Yevonim, so in the secular world, the wiser you are, it can actually be feeding your ego, which in a certain sense makes you dumber, i.e., as we spoke many times, it's not a question of who's smarter, it's a question of who comes to truth. If your ego is being fed more and more and growing bigger and bigger, you're going to end up resulting in further and further from the truth. But by Chochmas HaTorah, it's the opposite. Since the vehicle, the key to Chochmas HaTorah is bittul, so through your bittul you come to more truth and truth. And that's why you can be a Chacham b'Chacham HaCheres, but you're so far removed from Chochmas HaTorah because you're being full of yourself makes you an actual total contradiction to Chochmas HaTorah, and you won't be mechaven to Chochmas HaTorah. And this is in general discussion about, Sodog V'Sid was in the mechaven alemis, Sodog V'Sid was nicht as evil mechaven alemis, and the answer is the more you're a bit likid, the more you'll be mechaven alemis. Now let's go back to the other pasuk where we spoke about being known by the Shvatim, and what the Rambam says about Ayin Tova and everything we just mentioned before at the beginning of the Shir. What the Rambam says, same thing. Ayin Tova means bittul. You're the type of person that can go out of yourself. If you go out of yourself, you're able to put yourself into that person's situation. It doesn't mean changing the truth. It means coming to the truth. Ayin Tova means to be objective. And to be objective means, automatically, you're giving the possibility to see a good thing. And all these things that the Rambam's talking about, that Nefesh Shvala, Chiburason Teva, V'diburim ason benachas. It means all the opposite of ego, all the opposite of my way or the highway. It all shows on one key ingredient, which is bittul. You want to have a good judge? You want to have a good leader? The measure in Torah of a leader is one measure, and that is bittul. And now we come to another major point, talking about judging. I'm not going to elaborate on this, and probably I did somewhere else. We'll spend a couple of minutes just on this one sikha, because it's also very, very fundamental, and then we'll get to Rabbi Yoel. There's a famous sikha, life-changing sikha, game-changing sikha, Noach Chelik Yud, where it says that Noach was immodest, and then there was Shem, Chum, and Yafes. Chum messed it up, but Shem and Yafes, they covered the father Noach. It says, Holcha acharanis, upneim acharanis, ve'erva saviyim leiro. They walked backward, they turned their faces aside, they didn't see their father's nakedness. The Rebbe asked in the Sikha Chelik Yud, why did the pasuk say ve'erva saviyim leiro? They didn't see the father's nakedness. Wasn't it obvious? Once you say upneim acharanis, ve'holcha acharanis, of course ve'erva saviyim leiro. So to answer that, he goes into a whole discussion of speaking explicitly in the Torah. Sometimes we see that the Torah speaks in a very, very refined language, and sometimes it seems like it's more explicit. And the Rebbe brings from commentaries that make a difference. It depends if we're talking about law, halacha, or sipur dvarim. If we're talking about law, we have to be clear. Start saying klor. You can't dilute it. You have to be clear and explicit when it comes to the law. When it comes to the Torah telling a story, then the Torah uses more of a refined language. That's about language, speaking, but then there's also about seeing. And he asks a famous kasha over the mamish. The Baal Shem Tov said, whenever you see something wrong with another person, it's a mirror. You're seeing something wrong. The Eibishter wants to send you a message that you have this problem, so therefore you see it in another person. It bothers you very, very much. That guy is such an ego. That guy is so full of himself. That guy has no anger management. Whatever the story is, all those things that you're seeing in the other person, the Baal Shem Tov says, Spiegel, it's a mirror. It's mirroring what's going on in you. But if so, the Rebbe says, how could anybody ever fulfill the mitzvah? How could you ever help another person? And the Rebbe gives the same answer, a moedic answer. It's a difference if you're looking at the other person and you see it as a statement about that person, or you see it as halacha. Why did the Eibishter show me this thing in that person? Because it's not a statement about him that now I'm going to judge him differently. Oh, wow, he also has this problem. No, it was shown to me because I have to know how to react, first responder, to help him. It was shown to me because that means that for some reason I could help him. And that's my only thought in my head. How could I help him? And eradicate judgmentalism completely. There's not an ounce of being judgmental. What's there? What can I do? It's a call for service. It's a call of responsibility. What are you going to do for him to make him better? To alleviate his situation? That's the only thought that's in your head. And that's the Rebbe's answer. If what you see is halacha what it demands from you, no problem. That's why the Rebbe should show it to you, and that's good, and it's nothing wrong. Because we took out the judgmentalism. But if you're looking at that person and you say, wow, I can't believe he does that also. Wow. So that means what you're looking at is something which now you're judging that person's character. And you lost respect for him and who knows what else. That means then that it's really a flaw in you. And that's the moedic answer when the Rebbe says, Ve'ever savim leiro. When the Pasuk says, Ve'ever savim leiro over here, it doesn't mean Ve'ever savim leiro physically. That we know already. Ve'ever savim leiro, their respect, Shem and Yaf's respect for the father did not go down by one iota. That's what it means, Ve'ever savim leiro. It's like they didn't see it. The same respect, veneration that they had for the father before they have now. So that's another point. When we say a judge has to have ayin tova, the judge is not going into the job and the mission of being a judge to be judgmental. On the contrary, he's going into the thing being a judge to come to truth, what the Eibishter wants, and what the Eibishter wants is for the best of this person. And that's what it means. He has an ayin tova. It's all for the good. It's all the Eibishter's rotzen. It's completely depersonalized. It's not about my ego. It's not about a definition of that person who's involved in such a sordid court case. It's about one thing and one thing only. What does the Eibishter want, and how can I help him and make the situation better? Now, I just want to speak a couple of words about Reb Yoel. One of the most unbelievable things about Yoel, Reb Yoel was covet, honor. If I want to think about selflessness and bittul and everything we spoke about today, I can't think of anybody better than Reb Yoel Kahn. The man was completely selfless. I think that the concept covered by him, I cannot describe it to you. Somebody said after he passed away that he was by the Levaya and that they made an announcement, whoever wants to be asked Mechila for Reb Yoel should please go now and ask Mechila, because that's the custom when they bury a person by a funeral, to go over to the body and ask for forgiveness. This person was saying that he was standing there by the funeral, and when they made that announcement, he figured to himself, Reb Yoel doesn't want nobody to ask for Mechila. Because to him, the whole idea that there's something that he could become offended, that he could have become offended by somebody because somebody didn't respect him to the level of respect he deserves, was completely ungefragt. It's completely not shaykh. And the same thing is the reason why, in my humble opinion, why Rabbi Yoel was the most successful communicator and mashpia, because there was nothing else over there except Chassidus Alein, Chassidus B'Ta'arasa. There wasn't ego, there wasn't him, his personality, who he is. He's just al derech, like it says when you get to Moshe Rabbeinu, the Eibishter, Shechina medaberes b'terech reinei. Moshe was Hashem's speaker. The Rebbe was Rabbi Yoel. Rabbi Yoel was the Rebbe's speaker. We looked at him as somebody who's completely bottled to the Rebbe, completely. Until, of course, how many times did he speak about the union of Ani Leini V'Reis Yoel L'Shamash Es Kaini? And because of that, because he was so transparent, because he was so not about himself, therefore he was able to relate to everybody. Anybody who's in a certain tziyur, whatever doesn't fit that tziyur becomes a contradiction. But what about somebody he's not in a tziyur? He's not Mr. Authority, he's not Mr. Judge, he's not Mr. Boss, he's not Anhola. What is he? Torah. Elokus. And that's why Rabbi Yoel was so much into Achdus Hashem and Ein El Milvadei. And I felt it so appropriate this year, the Shir Tanya of Chitas, of Vov Menachemov, was Igeres HaKodesh Kotointi, which represents humility. See Kotointi, Igeres HaKodesh Beis. And over there he says the words, Kol HaKorev Korev Yoser, Yoser Kala. In direct proportion that a man is more aware of the infinity, more aware of Hashem's Ein Sof, the less he feels himself. I don't think there was another chassid that thought and lived Achdus Havaya as much as Rabbi Yoel Kahn. So what's the net result of a Chassidish Yid was slept Einoid, Milvadei, and Achdus Hashem 24/7? You have a Yid who's Kol HaKorev Yoser Kala. He becomes egoless, he becomes selfless, he couldn't care less about COVID. And this is the message for today. Before Shabbos Chazain, before Tisha B'Av, as the Rebbe said many, many times in the 9 days, that it says that the Churban came about because the Sinas Chinam, so the Geula is going to come about through Avas Chinam. My friends, first of all, we have to take the Sikha of Chelik Yud, Noach. Whenever we see something bad about somebody else, don't say, this is now a definition of who that person is. No. You have to be thinking only one thought. What could I do to make it better? What could I do to help him? That's the reason why I was shown this story or became aware of a certain fact. That's the only thing you should be thinking of. The Ervas Havim Loiro. Number one. And that goes to how we look at everybody. And number two, every one of us is a leader in a certain sense, a mashpia, a leader in his family. He could be a teacher, he could be a boss, whatever it is. Every person has somebody who is a leader for that person. So take in mind what we spoke about today. What were the leadership qualities that Moshe Rabbeinu was looking for? The first pasuk we mentioned, and then the second pasuk we mentioned. And both of them, as we spoke before Bariches, the whole shir today is about the Nekuda of Bittul. It's easy to talk about, but we have to talk about it. Not only to talk about it, but to actually live it. So I'm talking to myself, Hashem should help. It's a lifelong mission to go on an ego diet. And every day, our connection to the mission to live a life of Ani Leini V'Reis Yoel L'Shamash Es Kaini should be greater than it was the day before. And this will make you a better father, a better husband, a better yid, a better person all around. And in the schus from them, we should have the Gula Mitzvah Shlema. And all the Talmidim of Rabbi Yoel Kahn should try to remember and to go in his ways of what he taught us. Chassidische Drachim. And the merit of all these things, there should be the Gula Mitzvah Shlema take it from my yad, mamish. Posting from my home, Be'ez Hashem Yisbarach, your man in Melbourne.